Welcome to the Mount Pleasant podcast, featuring discussions and interviews about the people, places, and events that make Mount Pleasant such a special place.
This is the Mount Pleasant podcast. I'm your host, Brian Cleary, and all thanks to the great people at Mount Pleasant Magazine, I get the honor, the privilege of introducing you to Mount Pleasant, the people who make it such a special place to do business, to work, and even to live. We're introducing you to Mount Pleasant's best on the Mount Pleasant podcast. Community, it's a big part of Mount Pleasant. One of the great things about living in the town of Mount Pleasant is the people that we're surrounded by. And there's an organization that talks about neighbors helping neighbors. And it's our subject today. It's the Mount Pleasant podcast. I'm Brian Cleary, joined by Stephanie Kelley. Stephanie is the Executive Director of East Cooper Community Outreach. Stephanie, first of all, thanks for taking the time to join us here on Mount Pleasant podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited about the opportunity.
Well, let's talk. Let's get right to it. East Cooper Community Outreach. What is it that you guys do?
Well, thanks for asking. I'll give you my little elevator pitch when people ask what ECCO is, our acronym. That's sort of what people often refer to. ECCO, East Cooper Community Outreach, is a human services organization that started in response to the needs that were in this community after Hurricane Hugo hit. And I like to tell people 33 years later, we still are helping people who have storms blowing through their lives every single day.
Now, it could be that some people will say, well, the East Cooper Community Outreach, that's in Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant, come on, people in Mount Pleasant, they're all rich. They don't need any assistance. That's not the case.
And that is not the case. And thank you for that opportunity to clarify that. There are pockets of poverty in this community. And as Mount Pleasant has grown so much over the last 33 years, it becomes harder and harder sometimes to make the case. You're right, because as you look around, there's so much affluence here, and it's a beautiful area and so much great things happening. It is important. I love our founder had made the comment that Hurricane Hugo blew the blinders off of his eyes to see the needs in this community back in 1989. And while I hope there's no storm anywhere in the near future, there are times we do have to blow the blinders off of people to know that there are families that are struggling financially. And when I talk about those storms that blow through people's lives, people walk through our doors for a multitude of reasons. They may have grown up in generational poverty, and their family has always struggled. But there's a lot of people who, because of an addiction issue, because the death of a breadwinner, because of a divorce is a big reason. Often we find people who are struggling financially to make ends meet. A health diagnosis. We had a client that I became knowing her very well, working with her, who came to Mount Pleasant to make a fresh start after living in Colombia. So she comes here, she gets a job, everything's going great because she and her son have escaped this domestic abuse situation. And then all of a sudden, her son starts having seizures and figures out that he's got a major health issue. She lost job after job because she's a single parent getting a call that your son's having a seizure at daycare. Right. She had to go and take care of him. And so she found herself unable to provide for herself. So there's just so many different reasons that people come in here. And again, you just may not even be aware of all the things that are going on with the people that you see that appear just to be having a great life.
And to take that a step further, it's not like your organization, you've got to be within the city limits of Mount Pleasant to receive our help. You are branching out beyond the city of Mount Pleasant.
That's correct. So our service area is East Cooper is east of the Cooper River. So there are 10 zip codes that we serve, 20 towns. So we like to describe it as the base of the Ravenel Bridge all the way out to the Georgetown County line, and from the sands of the ocean over to the banks of the East Cooper River. And so about 50% of the people we serve do come from 29464 and 29466 zip codes. But we serve people in McClellanville and in Allendale, Hugie, Daniel Island. There's people coming from all over this area. Part of our campaign is how we do a better job of reaching people in those rural areas of our service area.
We're talking with Stephanie Kelley today on the Mount Pleasant podcast. I'm Brian Cleary, and we are talking about, she is the Executive Director of the East Cooper Community Outreach. Stephanie, let's talk a little bit about yourself. You referenced Hurricane Hugo. Where were you in 1989?
So I was actually working at a college in Collegeville, Pennsylvania. It was called Sinus College. My background is I spent 25 years working in higher education. And I remember I had resident assistants who were doing drives of collecting clothing and money and water to actually put on tractor trailers to send down to Mount Pleasant, having no idea that some years later, I would someday live in the area and then work in an organization that its genesis came from that. So my background, like I said, is in higher education. Love that. When I moved down to South Carolina, it was because I met the man who's now my husband. He wanted to move to Mount Pleasant, and I took a little break from higher education, and that's when I got involved with ECCO as a volunteer because I had some time on my hands, and then got more and more involved, joined the board, and eventually applied for this position when I was ready to go back to work.
Now, so does that mean you were born? Did you grow up in Pennsylvania?
No, was born in Mobile, Alabama. And so my husband, who's from the South, likes to tell everybody she's not from here, but she was born in the South and got back here as quickly as she could. So
as long as you're not from Ohio, we're all good. Well,
so I've actually been almost 20 years I've lived here, and I absolutely love it. It's a wonderful, wonderful part of the country, and just really good people that really care. That's what I love most about my job, is connecting with people who want to make a difference in their community.
Everyone's talking about real estate. The conversation continues with Voice for Real Estate podcast. Listen and learn from the experts who call the Carolinas home. Podcast advertising gives your business a voice of authority. Be heard. Advertise on this podcast. Visit voiceforrealestate.com.
You're listening to the Mount Pleasant podcast.
Well, it says a lot about your organization that somebody started as a volunteer is able to work their way up. So you've seen all the different levels of your organization. So let's start there. If someone's interested, do you need volunteers, and how do I go about volunteering?
So we're always accepting applications for people to volunteer. And depending on the time of year, sometimes we need people, and other times we're having to say to people, we will get you worked in as quickly as we can. Particularly with the pandemic, there are a lot of other organizations that haven't opened back up to having volunteers on site yet. And so we are getting a lot of response. And like me, I took a tour of ECCO. I tell people, if you've never been here, come take a tour, because it was the tour that made me say, how do I get involved? And so we love getting people in here, love the interest. Until we sometimes can get a spot for someone to volunteer, we also encourage them to think about, what could you do in your community? Could you host a food drive? Could you host a clothing drive? Could you help raise money? So there's other ways to get involved than just working on site. But people can go to our website and click the volunteer button, and then there's an application that you fill out and tell us a little bit about your strengths, your interest, what day of the week you might be interested in, what talents you have to share with us, and then our volunteer coordinator looks to connect you with the organization.
For the organization itself, is there an area where perhaps you don't have as many volunteers for this specific skill that you need? Is there more of a need in one area than another?
So where it's the most popular to work is our food pantry. People love being back there helping to shop for the food orders. Our clothing closet is off-site at the moment, but again, hopefully with the campaign, we'll be coming back onto this piece of property. That is a place where sometimes we definitely have some need. I will say we're always looking for people to serve on our development committee, which is helping us to figure out how to raise our annual fund money, which this year we have to raise $2.5 million to operate this organization. And so that's a committee. Because, they say asking for money and is one of those things that ranks up there, like things people are most afraid of. I think it's even people are less afraid to die than they are to ask people for money. So that's an area. So if you have an interest in helping people raise money and don't mind asking for that, we're always looking for people who want to share that talent.
And $2.5 million, that sounds like a pretty large operating budget. You're able to do so much, though, with that money.
We are. So, and we love to be able to share that about 90 cents of every dollar that people donate to ECCO goes directly to client services and programs. Some of that is staff that work directly with Prime, but we really try very hard to have low overhead, but that the money that comes in is going directly back out to buy food, to buy underwear and undergarments for our clothing closet, things that directly help the families that we're serving. So it is $2.5 million is a large operating budget, but we are getting at least that amount of value that goes directly back out to help these local families in need.
And it's got to be a great thing to be in a position where you have all these people in the community wanting to volunteer, trying to help out. What about the business community? Who are some supporters of the ECCO that are in the business community in Mount Pleasant?
Yeah, great question. And we are always open to other businesses that like to find ways to connect with us. One of our greatest business partners is with Nucor Berkeley. They are an annual sponsor of our golf tournament that we have. They also send people out on the day of caring to work at ECCO. So we love when we find people who financially want to support us, but also want to send people to volunteer and assist as well. So that's one of the big companies that come to mind. Almost all of the hospitals in the area, MUSC donates to ECCO, the East Cooper Community Hospital here as well. Roper St. Francis, huge partners of ECCO's. And then lots of small businesses, hair salons and local restaurants that will donate gift cards. We're very fortunate. We have such a generous community that we live in. And on our website, just if anyone's interested, we do have a list of our supporters, both small businesses, the grantors who help us out, Trident United Way and Coastal Community Foundation, those sorts of groups. And then also local churches is another major funding source for us. And we have about, I think, 38 churches right now that are financially helping to support ECCO's mission.
I think when people immediately think of ECCO, they think about the food pantry and clothes, but you guys do a lot more than that. And so when we talk about $2.5 million, and then you think, wow, 90% of that going to client services. So what else is it that ECCO is providing for people in need in the community?
So one of the biggest things is financial assistance. So we help with rent, mortgage, utility payments to avoid people either being disconnected, evicted, to be able to assist people. So again, not that we don't just pay a bill every year to pay a bill. It's something has happened and the pandemic being a big reason. We actually went from about a $60,000 a year financial assistance budget to a $500,000 a year financial assistance budget. Because you think in the pandemic, we had all these people who were having no money coming in, and so they couldn't pay their rent. And so we were trying to not just put Band-Aids on situations like, well, we'll pay $500 of your $2,000 a month rent, but we wanted to truly help people and make people whole. That was our goal. And so financial assistance is a big part. We also have a dental clinic where we do restorative and a care, including cleanings and exams, fillings, and extractions. We'll also do some partial dentures for people, sort of, if they're missing a tooth or two to help get their smile back. We have a medical clinic that operates 2 days a week to serve as a medical home for people with chronic health conditions who are uninsured. A prescription assistance program. Matter of fact, I just saw a receipt today of one individual who needed insulin that a 30-day supply cost $2,000. And we help to pay for that first month. And then we help people get involved with pharmaceutical companies to get those medications for free if they income qualify for that. So lots of different things that we're trying to do, again, to help people to be able to get what we refer to as those essential needs met so that they can focus on getting their life back into a more stable place to be for the long haul.
So if I know someone that could use some assistance, or I myself need some assistance and I want to reach out to ECCO, what are the steps that I need to take?
So you can always call. Our main number is 849-9220, and there is always a friendly person who will pick up that phone from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. We've just recently redesigned our website, and I love it. So when you go to ECCO Charleston, ECCOCharleston.org, the page is now set up where it says, want to help or need help? And that way you can click and get to the right information that you need depending on where you're at in circumstances. And our favorite stories are when people one day have to click on need help, and a couple of years later can come back and click on want to help. And we have people who do that, who say, you were there when my family was in crisis. And now that I've gotten things back, I want to figure out how I give back to help other families as well.
Wow, that's the circle coming all the way around.
It
Community,
is.
Neighbors helping neighbors.
Neighbors helping neighbors. That's what it's all about. Absolutely. So we do some other programs too, that beyond those, like medical, dental, the food, the clothing, the financial assistance. I do love to share with people. We have a program called our Asset Development Program, which is a savings match program where people can save $1,000 over the course of a year. And it gets matched 3-to-1 at the end of that year so that they can use that $4,000 for secondary education. They can use it to start a small business, or they can also use it for a first-time home buy purchase. And so that's a great program when people have sort of gotten out of that emergency need and are at a more stable place, but to help them develop assets, which helps move people out of low wealth family income into a higher level. And assets are how people, again, develop wealth. So we're trying to assist with that. We also do an annual holiday program called Adopt a Family, where we help connect people who want to do something at the holidays to adopt a family to buy gifts for someone. So again, a single mom who's got 3 kids, she's just making what she needs and things are going okay. And then all of a sudden the holidays come and she thinks, how can I buy gifts for my children? And she's not going to let her children do without. So instead, sometimes you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We want to say, let us get those gifts for those children. So, and we have amazing benefit focus as a big company that will adopt lots of families. Local banks will adopt a family, or law firms. They go shop the presents, bring them to us, and we get them to the parents to be able to give to their children. So that's another way that we help support. And we also do Thanksgiving meals for our families as well.
And the holidays, obviously a terrific time for ECCO and your organization, but you've got need 365 days a year.
Yeah, we do. And most people think about assisting during the holidays, which is fabulous. And we are so grateful for that. But right now, our shelves are pretty empty in our wellness pantry. Since the pandemic, we're sort of back to pre-pandemic times. That's not uncommon. But our biggest need for food is in the summer, because we have over 600 children living in the households that we serve. And those children are out of school, so they're not getting the free lunches. And so now their parents need more food to feed them while they're home from school. And so we give out a lot more food in the summer months to the families that we're supporting, because, again, they don't have that additional resource of the school lunch program. So.
Yeah, we're not thinking about it that way, but we think about that in the holidays, open the heart, and that makes sense there.
So we try to send that message that hunger never takes a vacation. So to remind people about that. And I've become so much more conscious of that, of like, when do we really need to donate to ECCO? In the summer months. And so I'm much more intentional about making sure that I pick up something a little extra when I'm at the grocery store to help all those working parents.
This is where the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine come alive. You're listening to the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm Brian Cleary, joined today by Stephanie Kelley. Stephanie is the Executive Director of the East Cooper Community Outreach, known as ECCO. You've got a $5 million capital campaign that you've just kicked off. Explain what the capital campaign is about and how can I help?
Great. Well, thank you so much. So we are in the community phase of that. We started active fundraising in November and are at this point I think we just tipped the $4.9 million mark, on our way to $5 million. It's an idea that started probably about 3 years ago, that we were running out of space in our current facility. So we were thinking about, how do we raise money to build a new building, perhaps move closer to the rural areas. We did a planning study, and what we learned is that our donors said, even if you could raise enough money to build a new building in this current environment, which we thought might cost close to $12 million, they didn't think it was the best use of the money. And said, go back to the drawing board. And so what we came up with, I think we got a no from our donors on that idea, and we came up with a better yes. So we are currently raising money to renovate our current facility, which will allow us to reunite our services all under one roof, because right now our clothing closet's over on Bowman Road and our main facility is on 6 Mile Road. That 3 mile drive can be a big deterrent of people being able to get over to get there and get their help. So renovating and reuniting, renovating our building, reuniting our services, the first priority. The second thing that the campaign will allow us to do is to do more outreach into the rural areas. For some people, public transportation is pretty non-existent when you start getting out into McClellanville and Allendale. So what our hope is develop some sort of mobile office that we could take our staff and volunteers out to those communities, and people don't have to drive 45 minutes to get to ECCO to access our services. It would also be, the mobile offices would be places we deliver food out there. People place their food order with ECCO, we shop it here, we deliver it to the mobile office, they pick it up in those locations. So the campaign's called Beyond Our Walls. So we want to knock the walls down in here to operate more efficiently. We want to get beyond our walls to be able to get out where people need us. And then the third thing the campaign will let us do is develop transportation solutions. So we have no intention of creating a mobile dental clinic or a mobile medical clinic, but we want to be able to have vans and volunteers who can drive out and pick someone up to bring them to our state-of-the-art facilities here to receive those services. So those are the three things that $5 million will let us do. So if someone is interested, they can go to our website and click on the page for the capital campaign, make a donation. We're looking for people who can make gifts of any size at this particular point, and larger gifts could be made over a 3-year period.
And that's ECCOCharleston.org. So get on the
Correct.
website. So Stephanie, you get up every morning, you go to work. What's the biggest challenge that you're finding these days?
The biggest challenge is we do so much. And again, we always say we can only serve the community because of the amazing support that we get from the community. But I think the biggest challenge is, again, we live in an area where life seems so idyllic, and
Right.
sometimes we can forget that there are people in need. So it's how do I constantly remind people? I never want people to feel bad about life is treating you well. Do like to encourage people that if life is treating you well, how do you give back to the community, to people for whom life is not treating them very well? But I think that's the biggest challenge, is constantly reminding people that there is need. And that unfortunately, there are some situations that there just aren't resources. There are amazing resources in this community, but you would be surprised how many problems come up that there is no resource for. And that, for our staff, that's hard when they see somebody who wants so hard to get ahead, but there's something that we just can't get them over that hurdle because there is not a funding source to help with X or Y or Z. So, and sadly, there's nothing free about any of the free services that we offer. So raising money is my other challenge. Right. Again, we live in an incredibly generous community, but we constantly have to work at encouraging people to see the impact and to remind them to give back. So
I guess in your position, that question before where some people would rather die than ask money, I guess you've gotten over that hump yourself personally. I have. That's a good thing. So what is it about you come to work every day? What's the joy? What's the passion? What's the thing that really makes you tick?
Whether it was in my career in higher education or now my working in the nonprofit sector, I just really want to leave this world a little bit better than I found it. And I used to tell students all the time, I figured out a long time ago, I wasn't going to find the cure to cancer, but I might help mentor a student who would find the cure to cancer. The people that we're working with are just human beings like you and I who are having rough times. They might have the cure to cancer. How do I help make their life a little bit easier so they can reach their full potential? That's what brings me to work every single day, is knowing that we're just trying to make life better. You see that little sign, people need people behind us. People do need people. And I love just being a part of trying to help make people's lives better. And that's our clients, that's our donors who want to be involved in helping to create solutions to problems in our communities. I just love being able to connect people to be able to make good things happen.
People watching it will go, wait, she's from Alabama. Does that mean she's a Crimson Tide fan?
I'm a Clemson fan. I'm married to one. That's where I have to cheer for.
There are rules around here.
There are rules. I learned that quickly when I moved to the South. So.
And it really says something about your organization, but I think the experience you've had, certainly the experience I've had here in Mount Pleasant, it really is the people. And to know there are people volunteer and people wanting to help, that really makes a difference in the quality of life that we all share here. It
is. And I hope people will know, when you give to ECCO or any of the nonprofits in this area, you're helping to make this community stronger. I get asked the question a lot, like, is there an ECCO in every community? And I'm like, no, but wouldn't our world be a better place if there was, if every community could take care of those who are struggling? I love this model. Our past board president always says we need a franchise. I'd like to think that we could help inspire some other organization to replicate Monsignor Carter's vision and what ECCO has grown into. Because again, it makes a world of difference. One of the hardest things for our staff, when you said challenges, is when people call from people from outside of our service area. And our team never likes to say, oh, sorry, you don't live here. Instead, we want to say, well, here's who we'd like to refer you to. But there are lots of communities in our state that there is nowhere to refer people to. So we're very blessed with the resources that we have here because, again, people care and want to make a difference. So
it's the people. That's what
it's the people. All about. People need people.
There we go. It's the people that we feature every day in Mount Pleasant Magazine, and the folks that we feature here, like Stephanie Kelley, the executive director of the East Cooper Community Outreach, featured today on Mount Pleasant Podcast. We are part of a community. We have businesses, we have individuals, some that need help, some that can provide help. Hopefully, if you're someone who could provide help, you'll reach out and help the East Cooper Community Outreach. Stephanie, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure, and we appreciate all that Mount Pleasant Magazine does to help promote ECCO's services.
It's a great organization. We're proud to be featuring them today. East Cooper Community Outreach today on Mount Pleasant Podcast.
Thanks for spending your time with the Mount Pleasant Podcast. Your community, your podcast. Listen to past and future episodes at mountpleasantpodcast.com.